Hello, and welcome to Day by Day True Crime Stories, the podcast where we explore a different crime or justice milestone from this day in history. I'm your host, Kona Gallagher, and today is May 6th. On this day in 1974, 20-year-old Roberta Kathleen Parks, known as Kathy, left her dorm at Oregon State University for what should have been an ordinary walk across campus. But she never made it to her destination. And tragically, she would later be linked to one of the most notorious serial killers in American history, Ted Bundy. Today, we're looking at Kathy's life, the night she vanished, and the investigation that would eventually uncover the terrible truth about what happened to her. Let's get started. Roberta Kathleen Parks was born on February 27th, 1954 in Lakewood, Ohio. She was the daughter of Charles and Catherine Parks and had two sisters, Susan and Sharon. When Kathy was a teenager, the family moved to Lafayette, California, where Kathy attended Acalanes High School, graduating in 1972. That fall, she enrolled at Oregon State University in Corvallis. She majored in religious studies, which was a reflection of her thoughtful and introspective nature. People described her as shy, quiet, and kind. A young woman who didn't open up easily, but had a close circle of friends who knew her gentle spirit. But by the spring of 1974, she was going through a rough time. She was homesick, she was processing a recent breakup, and on top of that, she was carrying a lot of guilt from a really bad argument that she had had with her father that had been followed by him having a near-fatal heart attack. Friends said she wasn't herself. She seemed more withdrawn, and some said that she had been drinking more than usual. Still, on the evening of May 6th, Kathy decided to meet up with friends for coffee. It was a short walk that she was just going about 350 yards from her dorm, Sackett Hall, to the Memorial Union on campus. She left around 11 p.m. and stepped out into the cool Oregon night. But she never made it. First, people wondered if Kathy had just needed some time. Maybe she had left campus for a bit to clear her head. After all, she had been going through a rough patch. Some thought maybe she just said forget it and ran away. But those who knew her best pushed back on that idea. This wasn't like Kathy. She wouldn't have just vanished without telling someone. And her disappearance grew even more concerning when it was put into a larger context. In the months leading up to that spring, several young women, most of them college students, had gone missing under eerily similar circumstances all across the Pacific Northwest. All of these women were young, attractive, and had long brown hair, often parted in the middle, just like Kathy did. But there was hesitation to connect her case to the others, mainly because Corvallis, Oregon was a little outside of the known cluster of disappearances in Washington state. But still, the pattern was hard to ignore. In a few of the other cases, witnesses described a man, clean-cut, charming, who approached women and asked for help. Sometimes he had his arm in a sling, and he told them his name was Ted. Kathy's case, though, didn't really have much to go on. There were no witnesses, no signs of struggle, and no physical evidence was left behind. Investigators were stumped. And at that time, law enforcement agencies in different states didn't always share information the way they do now. The disappearances across Washington, Oregon, and eventually Utah were initially treated as separate incidents. That lack of coordination allowed the person responsible, Ted Bundy, to keep going. Over time, though, investigators did begin to piece together the similarities between the cases. But still, without a body, Kathy's fate remained a mystery. Then, on March 1st, 1975, nearly a year after she vanished, two forestry students were hiking through a wooded area on Taylor Mountain, southeast of Seattle. They stumbled upon something they never expected, a human skull lying on the forest floor. The next day, detectives returned with search dogs and began combing the area. More remains were discovered. Some intact, others scattered across the ground. Wildlife activity had disturbed the scene, but it was clear that something horrifying had taken place there. Dental records would later confirm it. Among the remains were those of Kathy Parks. The discovery on Taylor Mountain marked a grim turning point in the investigation. The two students who found the skull, Alex Kamola and Larry Sherry from Green River Community College, were out there for a forestry project. When they realized what they'd found, they didn't touch anything. Instead, they went straight to the authorities. Detective Robert Keppel and his team returned to the site on March 2nd, photographing the skull in place and collecting what they could. But it wasn't until March 3rd, when search dogs and rescue teams joined in, that the full scope of the discovery came into view. They found skulls, jawbones, and other remains scattered across the forest floor about 550 feet from the nearest road. It was a remote area, and scavenging by animals had moved the bones far from the original locations. Through dental records, several women were identified, including Kathy Parks. Years later, in 1989, shortly before his execution, Ted Bundy finally confessed. He admitted to abducting Kathy from the Oregon State University campus and taking her to Taylor Mountain, where he murdered her and left her body. He told investigators that he had chosen the location because it was secluded and because he believed animals would destroy the evidence. Sadly, he was right, for a while at least. The confirmation of Kathy's fate was devastating for her family. The mystery was over, but the reality was almost too much to bear. She had become one of Ted Bundy's many victims. Her family, friends, and former classmates mourned a young life full of promise that ended far too soon. And while Bundy's eventual confession brought some closure, it also brought fresh grief. The loss, after all, never really goes away. Today, Kathy is remembered through memorials both online and in person. At Oregon State University, her story is still felt, especially around Sackett Hall, the dorm where she lived. Over the years, students have reported strange occurrences there. Doors opening on their own, unexplained cold spots, and that eerie feeling of being watched. Some believe that Kathy's spirit still lingers. Whether or not that's true, the emotional imprint she left behind is real. Her case also played a larger role in shaping how we approach missing persons cases, especially those involving women. Her murder, along with those of Bundy's other victims, really highlighted the need for law enforcement agencies to communicate across jurisdictions. Back in the 70s, those systems simply weren't in place, and it gave killers like Bundy the time and the space they needed to operate undetected. Kathy was more than a name in a headline. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend. She was studying religion. She had dreams, questions, and the same uncertainties most 20-year-olds do. And her life was stolen by someone who thought he could get away with it. But thankfully, in the end, justice did prevail. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of Day by Day True Crime Stories. If you found Kathy's story compelling, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It'll help us grow. And be sure to join me again tomorrow as we explore another significant event in true crime history. Until then, stay safe and remember that behind every headline is a life worth remembering. Day by Day, True Crime Stories is a Little Monster production.
Hey, you can do it!